Hey everybody, it's day 22 of my AMA video series in support of my fundraiser for the Norwegian Refugee Council. As you can see, I'm back in my car. It's because we just came back from Tango and my son is being put to sleep right now and I don't want to wake him. So thus the fancy car-based TV studio, I guess. Today's question comes from Mary and she asks, are there any situations where I should not be using WordPress to build my website? Now this is the flip variant of a common question, which is, should I use WordPress to build this website? The simple answer is yes, there are a ton of cases where you should not be using WordPress to build your website. The challenge is always to know when WordPress is the appropriate tool to use to build a website. So think about it this way. WordPress is very much a content management system. So I tend to describe it as the interface between the publisher, so that would be the person writing content, a database where that content gets stored, and the visitor. So basically when you create content with WordPress, you're just making a bunch of entries in a database and uploading a bunch of files to a server. Then when someone comes to the website, they go through WordPress to get to the database, and then WordPress puts all the pieces together to present you with something meaningful. That means you can use WordPress anytime you need to manage content which is complex enough that it should go into a database. It also means if you're working on a simple project where you don't have a lot of content, or you maybe just have one page or a set of pages and there's not going to be a lot of changes, WordPress can easily be overkill. Now, of course, you can use WordPress to build very basic websites. However, setting up WordPress does require setting up WordPress and setting up a database and populating all the content and then keeping WordPress up to date and doing all these other things. But if you only need a very basic website that's not going to change a lot, just building the website using HTML and CSS and some basic JavaScript is actually fine. There's no reason why you must use WordPress to do things. In fact, for very basic websites, there are many other options that are better, including GitHub pages and Jekyll and all these other static site builders are usually better options than WordPress because you don't need to keep them up to date. You don't need to suddenly change something because a new feature comes out or anything like that. So the line, guess who's still sick? So the line for me is usually drawn either by how simple the website is. If you only need something very basic, WordPress is probably overkill. Or if you're going on the opposite end and you get something super complex, then WordPress might not be the best option. Now, when I say super complex, I mean something like if you're building a website where okay, I have to give you a practical example for this to make it make sense. So I worked on a website that was for a TV show, and the TV show had, it's one show, but it had 4 different hosts, those lifetime shows things, but hosts with different expertises. So the show had one website, but then each of the individual hosts had a subsection within the website that needed to be branded according to that host, and then each of these subsections had forums and e-commerce and a bunch of other stuff. And for that, to do that in WordPress, you'd have to either set up a multi-site installation with a bunch of subsites, or you'd have to set up a site with a bunch of, it would be extremely complicated. So for that, it would turn out to be a much better option to use Drupal. So if you're building, it's kind of like, you have to understand what WordPress does and what WordPress doesn't do, and then build your webs or pick your solution based on whether or not, based on your requirements. So I am a proponent of using WordPress when WordPress makes sense to use, and not when WordPress doesn't make any sense to use. That's a really vague answer, but that's the best one I can do. WordPress is not the right option all the time. WordPress is the right option some of the time. That's it. Now, if you have a question you want me to answer in this video series, now that I almost am not coughing anymore, you can go to the URL on the screen, morten.com/mortenisanold, and click on the Ask a Question button, send in your question, and it might be featured in one of these videos. If you want to donate to my 40th birthday fundraiser for the Norwegian Refugee Council, you can do that from the same URI. Just click on the Donate to the NRC button and help the Norwegian Refugee Council help displaced people and refugees all over the world. All right, I will see you tomorrow.